The revolving doors of the Helix Building rotated with mechanical grace, swallowing the rain-slicked woman into its atrium. Her heels made no sound on the obsidian floor, yet every camera in the lobby tracked her movement as if calibrated to tension. She walked not with urgency, but with purpose, a silk trench coat brushing just above her ankles. In her hand, a thin charcoal folder sealed with a black band. The concierge kiosk glowed cool blue under the hand of Martin Hale, assistant property director of the Varel Group. He glanced up, then down again, then back up. Something about her disrupted the space. A quiet asymmetry. He typed her arrival into the system, but paused before hitting enter. No name had been offered, no ID shown. She simply placed the folder on the desk. "Do you have an appointment?" Martin asked. The woman met his eyes and answered, "The system knows who I am." She tapped a slate-black card against the terminal. It blinked red, then gold. The interface reconfigured itself. A message appeared. Protocol Phantom in effect. Martin froze. Behind him, Claire Wren's hands stopped mid-keystroke. No one ever triggered that protocol. The woman turned and walked past the desk into the elevator without a word. Behind her, the air seemed to still. Near the guest fridge, a junior associate named Ellen paused, her eyes fixed. 2 floors up, the surveillance operations suite lit up. Her name appeared, filed under internal contingency asset, dormant. Until now. Ellen returned to her desk and initiated manual override. A message blinked on her screen. Condition indigo. Do not stall. The building responded, logs updated, elevators recalibrated, cameras shifted. The woman wasn't being tracked. She was being obeyed. 2 floors up in the surveillance operations suite, the envelope's contents were already uploaded and decrypted. The system cross-referenced access codes, timestamps, and digital authorizations. All valid, all recent, but flagged with an annotation only a handful of executives had clearance to use. Condition indigo, do not stall. The annotation pinged in the system like a silent alarm. Not loud, not visible, but absolute. In the lobby, Ellen returned to her desk. She didn't ask questions. Instead, she unlocked the master console and began the override process manually, a move not used in years. The woman didn't thank her. She simply placed one hand lightly on the edge of the desk, and the building responded. Behind the scenes, logs updated, elevators recalibrated, internal cameras shifted angles by a degree. The algorithm behind the hotel's behavior recognition system reprioritized its watch list. This guest wasn't being tracked. She was being obeyed. The terminal blinked again, red. Manual access blocked. Audit in progress. The words pulsed once, then locked in place. The glow from the screen threw Malcolm's face into cold contrast. He froze, hand suspended above the keyboard, suddenly aware that every move he made was now being logged, possibly streamed. Luciana didn't flinch. Her obsidian access card remained exactly where she'd left it on the brushed steel countertop. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't stepped forward, hadn't explained herself. And yet the entire reception area had shifted on its axis. Power had changed hands, silently, irrevocably. Across the room, a pair of junior associates pretending to adjust a welcome display exchanged a quick glance. One mouthed a single word. Audit? The other nodded, pale. Above them, a discreet ceiling camera adjusted its angle with the faintest click. Someone, somewhere, was definitely watching now. Gemma's screen updated mid-keystroke. A new directive appeared on her secondary monitor. Tier 0 override authenticated. Initiate passive logging. She stared for a heartbeat, then clicked open the secure thread. Her message was only 5 words, but it might as well have been a siren. Tier 0 confirmed. Compliance is live. Behind the concierge desk, Brandon stepped away from his station, not toward Luciana, toward the side wall where the internal staff terminals were mounted. His badge didn't work. The lock pulsed red, no alert, just a denial. That was the second message of the night. "You're not in charge anymore." Malcolm finally spoke. "There must be a system error." The words were dry, empty. He was speaking more for himself than anyone else. But even as he said it, he looked around, searching for someone to validate the lie. No one moved. Luciana turned her head just slightly, eyes sweeping the mezzanine above them. From this angle, the surveillance mirrors caught her reflection at least 3 times. Let them watch, she thought. Let them catalog the moment everything shifted and pretended it hadn't. Then she tapped once on her phone. That was all. But within seconds, the entire floor's lighting adjusted, barely perceptible to the untrained eye, but unmistakable to those who knew the system. The audit wasn't coming. It was already here. The atmosphere inside the Santoro residences was no longer neutral. Guests still sipped cocktails, bell staff still smiled, and ambient jazz still floated through the air. But beneath the surface, tension had calcified into certainty. Something was happening, and those who had ignored the initial disruption were now quietly repositioning themselves to observe it. A middle-aged couple near the lounge bar paused their conversation to watch the front desk. A man in a tailored linen suit slowly tucked his phone away and began recording from his smartwatch. The concierge tablets blinked in sequence, new access directives cascading down the chain of command, skipping familiar names. Malcolm attempted one last gesture of control. He reached for the lockbox. "We'll secure the guest card until verification is..." But he didn't finish. The lockbox was already sealed. A soft click came from within, followed by a system-generated voice from the terminal. Object custody reassigned. Access suspended. Even the tools no longer obeyed him. Gemma stepped forward. For the first time that evening, she spoke directly to Luciana. "Do you want me to escort you upstairs?" Her tone wasn't deferential. It was operational, as if the entire charade of denial had never happened. Luciana didn't answer. She simply picked up the access card and turned toward the private elevator bank behind the concierge station. The moment her card scanned and the light flashed green, every person in the lobby knew. The fiction had ended. Malcolm stood frozen, blinking at the now blank screen. His authority hadn't been questioned. It had been erased. His team didn't look at him. They looked at the elevator as it opened for a woman who had never raised her voice, never made a demand, never offered credentials. Just presence. Brandon quietly slipped away from the terminal, stepping into the hallway near the guest services office. He pulled out his phone, not to check social media, but to log a mandatory report. The file name was already filled in. Live protocol activation, Site Alpha. Upstairs, the executive floor received a silent push notification. Compliance alert. VIP override triggered. Doors unlocked. Access logs began syncing. The most private level of the Santoro was now under internal review. Not announced, not discussed, just done. Luciana stepped into the executive-level corridor, her heels silent on the soundproofed flooring. The lights here were warmer, the air subtly perfumed, the design intentional in every corner. But she didn't slow to admire it. This wasn't a tour. This was reclamation. Behind her, the elevator doors closed with a soft hiss, sealing off the noise from below. In its place came a deeper quiet, the kind that signaled watching eyes and recording devices. The corridor's embedded sensors registered her presence. A faint chime echoed from the ceiling panels. She was now logged into the floor's private movement grid. At the far end, a glass-walled lounge overlooked the city. 2 men in charcoal suits were already standing by the windows, their postures rigid. Internal audit leads, flown in 2 days prior under pretense of a tech integration check. They weren't here to observe anymore, they were here to compile. One of them, a man named Ezra, nodded slightly as Luciana approached. He handed her a tablet without a word. It displayed real-time footage from the lobby, data overlays included, timestamps, badge scans, command chains. Names were beginning to cluster, Malcolm's among the first, highlighted in amber. Not red yet, but close. Luciana scrolled, pausing at the access history for the staff terminals. She tapped one entry. Malcolm's override attempt logged at 6:43 p.m., immediately followed by a denied command from his supervisor's badge. She didn't comment. The data was loud enough. Ezra spoke at last. "We've begun the trace. Systems are syncing across regions. 2 other properties showed similar internal behavior patterns. This location was the pressure test." Luciana raised an eyebrow. "And?" His answer was simple. "It broke." She looked up through the glass. The city lights had begun to bloom across the skyline. Down below, the Santoro glowed like a lantern, bright, curated, expensive. But from this angle, it looked transparent, vulnerable, easy to read if you knew what to look for. Luciana didn't smile, but her voice, when she spoke, had the weight of inevitability. "Then we escalate, quietly." And just like that, the next phase began. The escalation wasn't loud. There were no raised voices, no sudden firings, no public declarations. Just a series of quiet reassignments and locked credentials, triggered one by one as the audit rolled forward. What had looked like a single point of friction was now a map of decisions, connected by behavior, tolerance, and silence. Malcolm, still at the front desk, felt the shift before he saw it. His login session expired without warning. The terminal dimmed. When he tried to swipe back in, his badge flashed red. Access denied. He looked to Brandon, who no longer returned his glance. Instead, Brandon stood stiffly behind the counter, reading a system notification on his own device. Director privileges suspended. Awaiting review. Gemma, who had once shadowed Malcolm like a second voice, now stepped slightly away from the desk. Her hands were folded behind her back, her eyes neutral. She wasn't distancing herself for safety, she was aligning herself with reality. Downstairs, in the staff corridors, the atmosphere changed. Word had spread, not through gossip, but through the unmistakable sound of policies being enforced. Doors that used to swing open with a staff badge now required biometric approval. Logged conversations were pulled from backup drives. The hierarchy was being reverse-engineered. A second team, operating out of an off-site secure room, began pulling guest feedback related to personnel interactions. Anything flagged under ambiguous tags like concern, inquiry, or miscommunication. Each report, once dismissed as noise, was now signal. Luciana reviewed footage from prior weeks, interactions captured by lobby cams, hallway logs, internal chat transcripts. Patterns emerged. She wasn't hunting errors, she was confirming habits. By mid-evening, the Santoro no longer felt like a luxury property. It felt like a controlled site. Management teams from nearby branches were quietly briefed. The code name attached to the process was simple, Lucent. It didn't stand for her. It stood for what happens when you strip away what's been hiding in plain sight. And for the first time since she entered the building, Luciana allowed herself a breath. Not relief, not pride, just preparation. The work wasn't over. It had just revealed its full shape. Across the city, in a dim conference room 2 floors below street level, the Santoro's legal team gathered, uninvited, but not unnoticed. They weren't part of the plan, and Luciana had made no effort to include them. But they arrived anyway, summoned by the distant scent of risk. Now they waited, folders in hand, unsure which direction the wind was blowing. Luciana didn't go to them. She sent Ezra. He walked in without ceremony and placed a single sheet of paper on the table. Not a legal threat, not a corporate memo, just a list, Dates, names, flagged decisions. It was the prelude to something larger, and it made the room go still. "Compliance already has it," Ezra said. "This is a courtesy." Then he left, door clicking shut behind him. Back upstairs, Luciana returned to the admin lounge. A soft ping echoed from her screen, an incoming transfer request from corporate. Not to stop her. To expand her authority. The Santoro was only the beginning. Meanwhile, the lobby had gone quiet. Guests whispered. Some packed early. Others stayed deliberately, sensing that they were witnessing the kind of story that usually gets buried behind headlines and spin. Cameras weren't needed anymore. The building itself was telling the story. Malcolm was escorted, not by security, but by silence. Staff made way as he passed, not out of fear, but recognition. His time was over, not in disgrace, but in clarity. The kind that leaves no argument, no shadow to hide in. Luciana watched it from above, arms folded behind her back. The system hadn't broken. It had worked exactly as designed, until someone refused to look away. And now, with every quiet ripple spreading across the network, it was being rewritten, not patched, rebuilt, and this time, in her name. By the next morning, the Santoro was no longer operating under assumption. It moved by acknowledgement. Staff walked softer, not out of fear, but focus. Roles had shifted. Leadership, once guarded behind hierarchy, now walked floor to floor with audit logs in hand. There were no announcements, no press briefings, just motion. Luciana stepped into the executive boardroom. The long glass table reflected back a different kind of power, not one asserted by status, but by presence. Ezra had already laid out the revised chain of command. CAM systems were cleared, review summaries logged, training revamps approved, all of it, done quietly. An hour later, the message went live across every property in the network. Subject line, redefining standards, starting with ours. It didn't come with a press release or PR-friendly language. No video from the CEO, no mission statement reboot, just a clear internal message sent to every department head, every floor manager, every staff inbox from reception to accounting. It didn't try to explain away the past. It didn't make promises. It simply changed direction. The wording was precise. Effective immediately. Guest and staff equity audits are active at all properties. Silence is not neutrality. Observation is not inaction. From today forward, our standards will be measured not by intent, but by impact. There were no bullet points, no legal buffer language. Just one clear shift in tone. Things would no longer be ignored because they were subtle. There would be no more benefit of the doubt when harm was done quietly, and no more assuming people would endure in silence just because they had before. The reaction wasn't loud, but it was fast. Within hours, inboxes across the network were filled with forwarded messages, flagged check-ins, and calendar invites for internal reviews. Not to debate the directive, but to respond to it. 3 properties immediately issued their own follow-up emails, affirming alignment. 1 initiated a complete departmental audit. Another launched anonymous feedback forms that same evening. 2 managers turned in resignation letters without being asked. They didn't argue. They didn't try to defend their records. They simply knew the message wasn't for them. It was about them. The culture that once insulated them had quietly expired. At the Santoro, a front desk associate printed out the message and taped it to the break room wall next to the coffee machine. Others followed. In one location, someone circled the words, "not by intent, but by impact," in red ink. In another, they added their own note, "We saw it happen. Now we make it real." The change wasn't flashy. There were no press releases, no LinkedIn triumph threads. Just the quiet weight of accountability settling into rooms that used to run on denial. Luciana saw the photo of the taped message that evening in a forwarded email from Ezra. No subject line, no commentary, just the image. She stared at it for a few seconds, then deleted it. Not to erase it, but because it had already done what it needed to do. She didn't need a keepsake. She needed follow-through. She didn't need applause. She needed consistency. And sometimes, to change the system, you don't have to start a revolution. You just have to stop letting the wrong people define the rules. That part stuck with me. Because I've seen what happens when people get pushed to the edges, expected to wait their turn, to not take up too much space. And most of the time, they just leave quietly. But sometimes, someone doesn't. And that changes everything. This wasn't about proving anything. It was about letting the system reveal itself. The mistakes, the bias, the assumptions. All of it was already there. She just stopped pretending it wasn't. And I think that's what makes it powerful. Not the high-stakes corporate drama, but the very human reminder that sometimes the most disruptive thing you can do is stay still when they expect you to step aside. If that resonates, even a little, don't let it sit in silence. Subscribe, comment, share it with someone who gets it. You never know who might need to see that they're not the only one refusing to disappear.
Stay.